You said your son was here last time. I think we spoke on the phone.
Oh, yes.
Does he live here in Boone?
No, he lives in Charles City.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he just come down for a few hours.
That's quite a drive.
It is.
Yeah, that's nice. So like I said, this is just a very informal conversation. And we're just going to talk about your years as a teacher, your time at ISTC, a little bit about how your day went, typical teacher day, talking about lessons. Did you go through consolidation?
No, I think they hired a teacher after me for a couple of years, and then the schools closed.
Okay.
I think there were only 2 country schools left in Winnebago County. That was it, 1951-52 school year.
Okay. So, you could state your name, your role as a teacher, what the name of your school was, the county, and the year, please.
Marion Timm. Well, I was Marion Gorbel at that time. And did you want the name of my school?
Yes.
I think I was trying to remember, and I think it was Mount Pleasant, but I don't know. I wouldn't even guarantee that part.
Mount Pleasant?
I really can't tell you. It was 2 miles east of Forest City and 2 miles north.
Okay. Did it have a number?
It had a number, and I don't remember it. I went back and looked for the information I had about it, and because I had pictures of the children and everything, a lot of things saved. But I did a very good job of sorting out things that my children would not be interested in when I'm gone. About 2 years ago. And most of that information went, and I don't remember it now.
Let's see here. And the years, you said Winnebago County, correct?
Yes, I was teaching in Winnebago County in country school. And I went to what's now UNI. It was Iowa State Teachers College. I started on the 2-year program to get a teacher's certificate. But I tested out of English 1, and that threw me totally out of the CAN schedule. So I took most of the things that were listed for first year of that schedule. But I wasn't following the same schedule that the other students on that program were. Well, at the end of the first 3 quarters of the school year, I didn't have a summer job yet. So Dad said, well, just stay in school and go year-round then. So I did. I went to summer school. And when I came home after the end of the summer school session, the county superintendent had called my dad and asked how much education I had. Could I possibly fill in and teach school, because school would be starting in a few days, and he was short a teacher. So I went for an interview with him, was hired. The next morning I got a driver's license so I could drive to school, and on Monday I started school. So I taught that year, and at the end of the year I was so tired out. I thought, oh, I must not be meant to be a teacher. So I resigned. Before the summer was over, somebody had asked me to come and teach in Fertile. Only first and second grade, 32 pupils, but only two classes to prepare for. And no no janitor work, didn't have to carry water from the neighboring farm, and so on. It'll be much easier. So I went and taught there. And then got married, and went back to UNI, which was State Teachers College yet, and got finished the 2-year. And altogether, I've taught 10.5 years in public schools. I've taught in daycare centers, and used what I learned at what's now UNI.
Wow.
Went on from there.
Yeah.
But what I learned in country school, I carried over to, when I went back, after my 2-year certificate, I was hired by the college because Hudson was the off-campus laboratory school then. And student teachers all either had their student teaching on the campus school, or else in Hudson. And this was one of the last years, toward the end, Hudson would be phased out. And they would start sending them out to other schools. Well, I would teach. This isn't country school. Do you want all this on? Or do you even want to hear about it?
You can talk about your career, absolutely.
Well, country school was the basis for my career. That's when I learned to teach. And when I taught in the Hudson, there again, it was a last minute thing. They needed someone, and called me to come and fill in. But I only had 2 years of college, and the student teachers all were finishing their 4th year. And so they told me, don't tell anybody about your education. Just go with it. That's what I did. But they had back up. Teaching country school, I discovered, yes, I had children in kindergarten through 8th grade, in every grade. And every class that had more than one child would have one that just learned so quickly, and then they were looking for something to do. And another that had to go step by step and maybe go over it again. So I learned to make out lesson plans for each child individually. And then when they had their lessons ready to recite, then they would come together and each share what they'd learned and how they'd learned it, what their process was. Well, that came in really handy when I got to Hudson to teach, just 1st grade then. And they had, the books were all still in a box sitting on the table. Nothing, in fact, the chairs were still standing on the table. So I had to set up the whole room before the kids got there that morning. And I found that they had 3 different sets of readers. All the materials from pre-primers through 1st readers, but from 3 different companies. And so I used it that way. I put one group in one set of readers, another reading group in another set, and the 3rd set. So I used all 3 sets of readers, so they all were finishing their books at the same time, but they learned from different perspectives. it was there, so I did it that way. And then I discovered that some of the children really wanted to read beyond what was in their books, so I started suggesting for each child what they might read out of the library, and then come and tell me about it when they finished reading it, and read some to me and so on. So we had a period like that worked into each class. And out of that, I also went with one of the professors, one who taught how to teach reading. We went to a international, I think it was International Reading Society or Association or something. And it was about 2.5 hour drive to get there. And we would go like once every other month maybe. And so we got well acquainted and talked reading, of course, because that's what was where my love was, and hers too. And anyway, we ended up, the two of us together, planned out an individualized reading program for schools and worked out a pilot project for that. And since she's a doctor, she could turn it in and it was accepted. And a few years later, I had a student teacher over in Hawkeye, Iowa, and she's from UNI, and she said that when she came in, she said, "I don't think I'll learn much here because I've been taught the individualized reading program." And I said, "Good, then it means that it did go through and is in use." I said, "I helped write and plan and write the pilot project for that." And I'd never heard another word whether, I knew it had been accepted. And that's as far as I knew. So. But you see, I wouldn't have been any help with that if I hadn't taught that year of country school. Because that was very different from the way they were teaching teachers to teach reading. So that's why country school is really special for me.
Well, in country school, you had groups of each grade.
Yes.
So you were able to transfer that.
Yes.
Towards the group reading.
Right. So, yes.
You were inspired.
It just gave me the knowledge of how to go about doing it, putting it into practice. And I knew it worked because I'd carried over that idea into my first and second grade classroom, and also into then when I was teaching just first grade. So that's why I was so excited when you wanted to come and talk to me about country school. I think country school is very, very good system. For one thing, the children from the very beginning hear what the others have been doing, reading, learning, and so on. It makes it a lot easier for them to go ahead and learn it themselves. I think that's important.
So that was one lesson that you learned from country school.
Yes.
Any other lessons that you learned that you could just kind of take with you your later years of teaching?
Well, the fact that if you really enjoy a subject, the children pick up on that and learn it better, get involved. They get involved because you care about it. And that's something I learned in country school too.
Yeah. So let's start sort of at like a beginning
Yes.
here in a sense.
Yes.
So where were you born? Did you grow up on a farm?
I was born on a farm, but I never lived on the farm other than that.
Okay.
Yes.
So you didn't grow up in the country necessarily?
No, Forest City. I've always lived in town.
Hmm. So then what led you to teaching? What led you to ISTC?
Well, I always loved school. Every year from first grade, well, I learned to read when I was 4 because I had a cousin next door who had the beginnings of reading in kindergarten, and she was a year older than me. So she'd come home each day and we'd play school in the afternoon and she'd teach me what she learned. So by the time I started kindergarten, I was reading first reader when almost done with it when my mother discovered that I could read.
Mm.
You know, because we played outdoors and she didn't know that we were sitting behind the house learning to read.
Mm.
Okay, so in kindergarten, I had a problem with it because they were teaching the basics, the very basics, the beginning of pre-primers. And I had to sit on the floor with a group and go through all that. I wanted to go play with the dollhouse.
Mhm.
I'd never had a real dollhouse.
Mhm.
Never, you know, and I was always making houses for my paper dolls and so on. So that just was, I don't even know where I was headed with that.
So this was at public school
That was in public school, yes.
in Forest City?
In Forest City.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. It sounds like you, your early years of education, you weren't stuck to the books necessarily, but
No,
but
never was. Once I learned to read, I just read everything I could get my hands on.
okay.
Mhm.
And that influenced you to go into a teaching career?
So I wanted other children to learn to read as much as I enjoyed it.
Mhm.
And
What were your favorite books?
oh goodness, I couldn't tell you. It changes over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my favorite authors change over the years. I think probably Grace Livingston Hill. I still have almost everything she wrote. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have all her published books and some collections of things she wrote for youth magazines and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can see I've got books everywhere.
Mhm.
I've got books piled this high above the bookcase in the bedroom
Mm-hmm.
and on top of my computer desk.
Oh, wow.
I've got piles of books, and I keep giving books away all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to read a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep going back to Grace Livingston Hill books, and which are written for early teens. The first one I got was one that my aunt gave me for Christmas one year, and I just loved it. But my family would go to the library on Saturday nights, and my mother would check out history and biographies, and travel and biographies. That was what she would choose, and one of each. And my dad would choose westerns, and my brother checked out a book if he was required to, but he preferred to exchange comic books with his friends.
Mhm.
Okay, and I would check out my 2 books. I start on the A's and I'd work my way right down the shelf. And I did that in school, in the classrooms too.
Mhm.
So I've read a lot. And then I'd go home and you know, not in the lower elementary grades, but by 4th grade, I'd read all the books that came from the library that week. And so, you know, when it comes to what's my favorite book, I couldn't tell.
You're just a lover of all books, aren't you?
Yes. Yes.
And it seems like definitely carried that love of reading in when you taught your students.
Yes.
And so did you ever see any of them to start to like reading a little bit more whenever you taught them?
Usually, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In country school, when they come in from noon recess, I'd have them just put their heads down on the desk for 15 minutes, and I would read to them. I gave them a chance to calm down and settle down. And I read classics that were my favorites then. I remember reading The Little Lame Prince to them, which is not usually taught in schools, but it's one that I had run into someplace. And in country school, I would go to the library and check out a box of books once a month, and I could keep them for a month
Mhm.
and bring them back for the children to read too. So that supplemented what they had in their school, in the school library there.
Okay,
And then they could check those books out and take them home to read. It's fun.
so books were provided, and then you provided more books.
Yes.
Did
Yes.
did the county superintendent provide those books that were already at the school?
They belong to the school.
Okay.
And I don't know whoever paid for them. They were there when I came.
Okay.
And yes, I just encouraged them to read. But and they really liked, you know, the books I read to them. They Pollyanna was one of the books that I read to them, and they were books that they wouldn't on their own pick out. So
So how did you go about choosing what books you would read to your students?
just whatever book popped into my mind that this is something different, they might enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember now what books. I remember one of them was it was poetry. I mean, it was something that a poet had written, and so it had rhyme to it here and there and so on. But just something different. And
Mm-hmm. When you read those books, did you find that their reading had improved, that their writing had improved in the other subjects?
yes, it carried over.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
And what grades did you have in rural school?
kindergarten through 8th grade,
Mhm.
and there were children in every grade.
And so you had kids from every single grade then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I realized that the younger ones might not understand all of what I was reading to them, but they heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we learn by what we hear, even if we don't understand at the time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, so you were at ISTC and then you were asked to go teach for a year, and then you were placed. And so let's talk a little bit about what did your mornings look like when you were a teacher? How did you commute to school? Did you ever have any troubles getting to school?
To country school now, yes. Well, my dad and I went out and bought a pickup because he really wanted a pickup, but he thought I'd be safer driving a pickup through the winter than anything else. And I made the payments on the pickup as long as I used it to drive to school, which was that whole year. And at the end of that school year, then he took over the payments, and it was his pickup. Okay. So that's what I drove back and forth, and I really didn't have any trouble getting to school, but a couple of times I had trouble getting home because a snowstorm or an ice storm moved in, and it just was very hard driving, you know, when you can't see ahead of you. and the one time was a kind of snow. We'd had sleet and then snow on top of it, and I'd sent the children home early, but by the time I got started, it was just so slick. I thought, well, gravel road would be easier probably. So I went, I don't know if you know that area. My school was 3 miles maybe north of Pilot Knob State Park. And so I thought, well, if I go, I was already down to the highway, and it was just a glare of ice with thick snow, so it was hard to see. And so I went on down to Pilot Knob, not realizing, not thinking that I would have to climb a hill. And by the time I turned the corner and then start climbing, well, I got about 3/4 of the way up that hill and couldn't go. It just wouldn't go any up the hill any farther. So I backed down the hill and went back to the highway. And, you know, if it was too slick to go up, you can imagine trying to back down hill and you could hardly see where the road was. Oh, that was my worst driving experience.
Well, hopefully you didn't have to cancel school other days.
We didn't cancel school because of the weather at all. If the weather turned bad, then I let the kids out early. And we didn't have any phones back then, so they had to get themselves home before. You know, so I kept close watch on the weather. There was one time when the snow came up really suddenly, and one of the men came for his children because they lived a little farther. And the parents out there were pretty good about watching for their children, and if they thought they might have trouble getting home, or if it turned too cold too suddenly, they'd come and get them. But that time he said, no, you can't even start home. You're coming home with me. And so, and they had four or five children in school, and they had twins, and then two more, three, I've forgotten. But I went home with them, and I slept with one of my students, I think a third grade girl. Their children were all girls.
Oh, wow.
And so that was an interesting experience, you know, to go home with them and stay.
Mhm.
And then the next morning the sun was shining, it was fine.
Mhm.
And farmers around came and plowed out the streets, you know, the roads enough so that we could get to school.
Mhm.
We didn't stop school.
Mhm. Did so? How far away did you live from your rural school?
4 miles.
4 miles.
Mhm.
So there was a time when you had to actually, your living arrangements were with another family.
Yes, just that.
Just that time?
That one night.
Mm-hmm. But that speaks about the tight-knit community that there
Mhm.
was in the country school.
There really was. They were just awfully good. And they'd look out for each other's children too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they came to pick up their child, they would take the ones that they could drop off on the way, or that it was only half a mile beyond them or something, and they'd take them home.
Mm-hmm.
So they were good that way.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really nice community.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to shovel the snow from your...
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did. But it didn't hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What other sorts of morning duties did you have when you arrived at school?
Well, I had to get out there early enough to get the heater going, and because it was a fuel oil heater. I didn't have to fill the tank or anything because they had a pipe. It was piped into the school from a big tank out behind.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to get there in time to get that done. And sometimes to break the ice in the water cooler, because we had one of those big stone coolers that with a spigot
Oh, you
that
did?
was in the entry hall. The entry was just all one room. It wasn't separate coat rooms.
Mm.
And in fact, there was an old pump organ, the kind that you have to pedal it to get it to work, out there. And the teacher before me played that, and when they had music, then the children all came around the door. We couldn't all crowd in out there. There wasn't room, but she'd play the organ to accompany their singing.
You had an organ in your schoolhouse.
Yeah, but I couldn't play it.
Uh-huh.
So my 2 years of piano lessons hadn't taught me much. So that didn't help. But we did have a good record player and all kinds of records that we could sing along with.
Mhm.
And I used that for teaching music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much music they got taught because I wasn't awfully good at music, but
You were the reader.
better at reading than music anyway. Yes.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about your schoolhouse. So you had an organ, you had a record player.
Mm-hmm.
So you walked in, there was an entranceway,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was another doorway to
Mhm, yes.
to the one room.
Yes.
Let's see here. Let's see. You had desks, of course.
Mm-hmm.
You had your own desk.
Yes.
Front, was it in the front or the back of the room?
In the front. In the front, over in the corner.
Mm-hmm. Can you take us around the room? What were some of the features of your room?
Well, when you first come in, there's an organ on the southwest wall.
Mhm.
Okay, and then boys' coats hung along the inside wall of that. So there was room to get in around the organ and get coats, but not a lot of space. Maybe the size of from here up this, a little bit longer than this.
Oh.
Okay. and then on the other side, on the east end of that entrance hall, there's, the girls hung their coats along the south wall, and then there was just a shelf where they put their lunch pails out on that shelf, and then the water cooler. So there was more floor space there, but that's all it was in that area. And when the superintendent would come to check things out, he would stand in there and listen to what was going on for, I never knew how long, because I never knew when he came. I didn't have windows toward that from inside.
Oh, you didn't have windows?
The windows were all along the east and west walls.
Oh.
No windows on the north wall.
Okay. Yeah.
And along in the south, there were windows looking out to the south of the entry hall. But with the inner door shut, I never knew when he was there. It always kind of tickled me, wondering what on earth he'd heard, what had been going on, how long had he been around, I don't know. But then, all right, then come in the door, and let's see. There were shelves, bookshelves, and they were deeper. They were storage shelves there, and the record player sat on top of that, and then windows all along the side, the west side, and 3 rows of desks, and then up the teacher's desk was up in the northwest corner. The whole north wall was chalkboard, and above it there was a picture of Washington, and I think a picture of Lincoln, and the alphabet was above the chalkboards, and there were maps that pulled down. There was an old set of maps above the teacher's desk in that area, and they were fascinating to me, but not very usable for the kids because they were so old. They were totally outdated, and but there were big maps up over the rest of the board, and the alphabet was white writing on dark green cards across, and a flag, I think a flag up between Washington and Lincoln pictures. And the fuel oil heater stood at the front. From the door, you could look right straight down a wide aisle, and there was the heater. And the children in the wintertime would bring foods set on top of the heater all morning, and then be hot and ready for a hot lunch then. All right, then the northeast corner had a bench and a chair for the teacher to sit, and that was what recitation corner was what we called it back then. And the bench was long enough to seat 4 children, and I think 4 was the most in any one class. And then down along the east wall, I know the bookcases, the library was down along that wall. And then the books I would check out of the public library, then I set out on the top of the bookcase there. I think there was a tall cupboard, like a closet, like the portable closets, I think was set in. I think that was the southeast corner of the room, and along the south wall, and where I could hang my coat and put my purse and so on, and store things on the shelf. So there wasn't a lot of storage space in a country school. For the most part, if you needed it, you had to bring it with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Were the walls white?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you have curtains on your windows?
No.
No curtains?
Mm-mm.
So you mentioned the flag. Did you say the pledge every day?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah?
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. We always started with the Pledge of Allegiance and we sang the Star Spangled Banner.
Every day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. And I think we had a scripture each day, and a brief prayer as part of the opening exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that was pretty much it.
Did you pick the scripture?
Probably did.
Okay.
I can't remember how I came by it. That was a part of what was done.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Materials in your school? You had books.
Mm-hmm.
Did the students have to provide their own materials, or were those provided by the county?
I think maybe they were already there, or yes, I think they were already there for them.
Like slates, workbooks?
Oh, they didn't use slates.
No slates?
No. We weren't that old-fashioned. This was in 1950-51 when I was teaching, so that's... No, if you, there's a picture behind you of Cole School, and that's 2 miles out of Boone. And that's one that the Daughters of the American Revolution have restored that school. It's built of 3 layers of brick.
Really?
Yes, the walls are 3 layers thick of brick, and so we thought it was worth saving, and so we've restored it, and now they've put curtains in out there because they said, oh, you have to have curtains because the sun would shine in. Well, the sun did shine in, but it didn't bother us.
Oh, so what was the name of this school?
Cole.
Cole.
Yeah, C-O-L-E.
Cole School.
Cole School. Yeah.
And you are part of the Daughters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And actually, my daughter is Barb. You've met her.
I believe so, yeah.
Barb McDougall at that meeting.
Briefly,
where
yes.
we were. Yes. She's the one that got us started with it. It's something Barb and I had seen, this old brick school sitting out in a field and were interested in it and wondered how it could be restored. Well, she's the moving force behind it, and it's now been accepted for the National Historic Register.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So,
neat.
We're pretty excited about that.
Oh, good for you.
But it took 9 years of working on it, and then another extra year. She started 4 or 5 years ago trying to get it accepted for the that register. And she was having trouble with the committee in Iowa that oversees that.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, we've already got enough things, we don't need another school. So they didn't want to do it.
Oh.
But it's done.
Oh, that's really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we need more people like you to save these schoolhouses.
Well, that's my daughter that did that.
Well,
Yes.
collective initiative.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because Brianna has helped with it a lot too,
Mhm.
but Barb is the moving force behind it, and the one that got interested in the country school organization because she was interested in this school. And so she's been very,
Mm-hmm.
very helpful in that organization
Mhm.
too.
And you
Yeah.
said that's how many miles?
It's 2 miles out of town.
2 miles. North, south,
It, north,
north?
yeah.
Okay. It's good to know. And it's a brick schoolhouse
It is,
too, which
yes.
isn't too common.
Well, no, there aren't very many brick schoolhouses left in Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the only one I've ever heard of the only building I've ever heard of that's made of 3 layers of brick in the
Mhm.
walls.
Now your schoolhouse was not brick.
No, it was
No.
a wooden schoolhouse.
Wooden white?
It was painted white
Okay.
with a flagpole out front.
Did it look
Mhm.
sort of like that boxcar style, with the 6 windows on each side, 3 windows on each side, very rectangular?
Very rectangular,
Mhm.
yes. Like this one. I think maybe there were just 3 windows on each side.
Okay.
They were big windows,
Mm-hmm. Did you have 1 door or 2 doors?
just the one.
Just one?
Mm-hmm.
What did the outside look like?
Well, it was set on 1 acre of land, and on the corner. There was a fence along the north and east sides because there were fields there.
Mhm.
But there wasn't any fence around the corner side. There was a lovely ditch that, a nicely graded ditch. So, and one day in the spring, the older kids were jumping across that ditch to see how far they could jump. And I was out there, I was sitting on the grass watching them do it. And one of the 7th grade girls, when she landed, I heard a crack.
Wait.
And I said, I got hold of her, helped her lay back against the grass, and said, now don't move. I heard it crack, and she said, it hurts. Well, we sent somebody down to the next farm to call her dad to come get her and take her in to be checked, because I knew she had a broken bone. She did, but it was a lengthwise crack. That was the end of jumping ditches.
No more.
No more.
No more injury.
No.
Was there a playground or anything outside?
Yes.
There was?
There were swings
Mhm.
and teeter-totter. I think that's all there were for
Mhm.
that. And they played ball out behind the school.
Mhm.
And in the wintertime, they could go across the road. There was a low area that made a beautiful skating pond.
Mhm.
And they'd go out there and skate at noon.
Mhm. Did you have a
Nice.
flagpole?
What?
Did you have a flagpole on your property? The acre
Yeah, yes,
flagpole?
yeah.
Did you have outhouses?
Yes,
Okay.
one in each corner of the back lot, yes.
Mhm. What sorts of games did students play during recess?
Um, the old-fashioned games, they liked Red Rover
Mhm.
and Pum Pum Pull Away and I don't know, I don't remember. The younger ones liked the swings and so on best, but the older ones liked to play group games.
Mhm.
And they liked bat and ball, but they, there wasn't enough room for a full for a full ball diamond, but they would they had their makeshift way of doing it.
Mhm.
And had a couple of bags, salt bags or something like that, with sand in it that they used for bases.
Mhm.
And they put them where they wanted them to be in.
Mhm.
So kind of makeshift, but meant they got to play ball.
Mhm. What is you said hum hum?
Pum Pum Pull Away.
Yeah, how do you play that game?
Two teams, and one team yells, "Pum Pum Pull Away, come away or I'll pull you away." And you have like 30 seconds for everybody on the other team to run through the group and not get caught.
Mhm.
And then the team that ran is then gets to yell it for the others.
Mhm. Okay.
Not a very good explanation, but it's the best I can do.
Get the sense, yes.
Yes. That's only been close to 70 years since I've played it or taught it or anything else.
So did you play with the students?
I didn't play games with them that
Mhm.
way, but I was out with them at
Mhm.
recess time.
Mhm.
So,
Was the equipment already there? The balls, the bats,
Mhm,
that
yes.
was already there?
oh yes,
Okay.
yeah. That kind of equipment was back in the corner under the shelf in the front entryway.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your lessons.
Mhm.
What subjects did you teach?
Well, reading and writing and arithmetic and history and geography. And science and health and spelling. What have I left out?
Music. You taught music.
Music.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that
It
seems
sounds like all of
everything.
them. That sounds like.
Mhm.
So you would start your day with, they came in at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock.
Mm. I think 8:30, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe it was 9 o'clock.
So they arrived at school and you started with what lesson?
Um, I can't tell you what order. I'm sorry.
No, no. But so you taught in the morning, then there was lunchtime, noontime,
Well, there was a morning recess
a morning recess.
Mhm.
Okay.
for just, 20 minutes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then at noon, we had a noon hour.
Mm-hmm.
For the ate lunch and went out and played.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then in the afternoon there was probably 20-minute recess
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of the afternoon, and school was out at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was your favorite subject to teach? Is it reading?
Well, I really liked history and geography too,
Mm-hmm.
just as much as reading. In fact, I liked all the subjects I taught except math. And I'm one of these people that numbers don't stick in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I did fine in math in school, but I really worked at it. And once it was done, I forgot it. So the 7th and 8th grade math especially, I would take my math book home every night and sit down and work every problem the kids were going to have to work the next day. Because I wanted to be sure that I knew how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I know the answers were in the back of the teacher's book, but I wanted to know how to work it. So I'd work it myself, and then I'd look up the answers to be sure I was right. And if I wasn't, I would ask my dad, how, where have I gone wrong on this, if I couldn't figure it out. My dad and my mother both went to country school.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Anyway, my dad with his, come in.
Are you coming to lunch?
Oh, forgot.
Oh. Okay, we'll wait on you.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
be there. Yeah, we better, can we shut this off and start again?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Will that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We can't have you.
A lot of things, a lot to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're thinking ahead, aren't you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, at the University of Northern Iowa Museum, we're in Cedar Falls.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole collection of all these books, all these records from rural school history, ranging from like the 1860s to the 70s and 80s.
Right, yes.
So if you find yourself in Cedar Falls, you could come in and look at some things if you would.
Well,
you wanted.
I helped Barb go through all the Cole School records over here at the museum here in Boone.
Oh, okay.
From 1889 through 1933 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And we went through looking for she kept lists of all the teachers and when they taught, and looking for any students who might still be living.
Oh.
And there is one man left he's over in healthcare now.
Okay.
The building out here is healthcare building.
Okay.
Yeah. this is that you see looking, if you look to the west,
Mm-hmm.
is part of the residential building,
Mm-hmm.
which is the biggest building, the oldest, the main building.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the residential building. And then if you look out my east window, no, you can't see it from here. It's on the other side of all that you can see north and east
Mhm.
is healthcare.
Mhm.
And then you came past the Hearthstone building,
Oh, yeah.
and that's the memory care unit,
Uh-huh.
Alzheimer's unit.
Okay. You have a unit for everything, don't you, Hugh?
Yes, yes, there is. And now what they built out west of this whole complex is wellness unit. They built on a physical therapy room just down below my windows,
Mhm.
attached to the healthcare unit,
Mm.
and found it was so useful that they built this whole wellness unit
Oh.
that has a small swimming pool, even things like that. So,
Wow.
but it's not in use yet. It's not totally finished.
Right.
And now they're remodeling the whole residential building
Mhm.
inside, and they're making plans for remodeling the healthcare unit.
Oh, wow.
So,
Everyone's always thinking ahead, right?
Got a lot of stuff planned.
well,
Yeah.
yes, they really are.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. We also have a one-room schoolhouse on our campus from Pocahontas County.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
The Marshall Center School, and we both work in there, and we open it up to visitors. We have visiting
Yes.
hours, so
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a bunch of people trying to preserve those structures.
Well, I'm glad because they're almost gone.
Mm-hmm.
One-room schoolhouses and barns in Iowa are going so fast because people can't afford or don't care
Mm-hmm.
about them. So,
Yeah. It's up to people like us to keep
yes.
that history alive.
Yes, that's the interest in history.
Mhm.
And yes.
All right, Marion.
Okay.
Well, tell us, do you have an the earliest memory you can think about of country school? Like, do you remember your first day there?
Well, my earliest memory of country school is probably, well, hearing my parents tell about country school and what they did and so on. But after that, I visited country school with my cousin once in a while, and the same school that my mother went to, because my cousin grew up on the family farm.
Mm-hmm. And that was, you said north of Forest City?
Yeah,
And do you remember the name of that school?
Landrew School.
Mm-hmm. And your father went to country school in
Out in
Nebraska, right?
Nebraska. And I can't tell you the name of that school, but I can tell you that his teacher was Miss Lamb all the way through school.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were going through Nebraska, and we stopped in Bassett at the city park to have supper before we found a place to camp.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat there and were talking about the country school and you know how Dad went to school and how he got there and how much he loved his teacher and the things that he was interested in learning and so on. And after a while, a lady sitting over at another picnic table came over and she said, "You must be a Gorbel." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I am Miss Lamb. I was your father's teacher in school. Your father was Harold." She said, "You look like him. I thought you had to be Harold's daughter." And she heard parts of our conversation.
Oh,
Small world.
You know, this little gray-haired woman, and she was just a little bit of a woman. And we just had the best visit.
Oh, I'm sure.
No, because this was, well, my kids were all growing up, you know. They were old enough to be interested in that kind of thing. But, yes.
I'm sure you two shared a lot about your experiences, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
That's quite wonderful. Let's see here. Oh, so we talked a little bit about your teaching style. So was how you grouped students up in public school, was that how you taught in country school as well? Did you teach by grade?
I'm not sure what you mean by grades. When I taught in town school, I taught first and second grade 1 year, and then after that it was first grade. But I have taught kindergarten. In fact, I was my daughter Barb's kindergarten teacher, and then I moved to first grade, and so I was her first grade teacher too.
But in country school, you would teach each student individually?
I made their assignments individual.
Right.
You know, those that needed more challenge to the work, that give them something to look up in the encyclopedias or something to write about it beyond what was the textbook said. Maybe questions you'd ask if you had a specialist to talk to about that subject, whatever, that kind of thing, so that they had something that would challenge them a little bit. And the others, I would make, when you've read this twice, make up a game to help somebody learn this. You know, just that kind of thing, so that they would use their imagination, use different skills to whatever they could to learn.
And then you brought that over into your...
Yes, but when I had a classroom of all one grade, then I'd give different children different assignments now and then. And so, yes, what I learned in teaching that first year, because I really hadn't had any how to teach classes at all when I went to teach country school. So it was making it up as I went along. But it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it.
So then you would evaluate students and then see if they needed more challenging assignments? Okay.
Yes.
And you did that for every subject?
Depending on what it was. Spelling, I didn't do that. And math, I didn't do that either. But anything they had to read, any subject that involved reading, yes, I did some of that.
Okay.
And not every day, but enough to keep them interested and going beyond just what the book said.
You mentioned the recitation bench in your school. You could seat 3-4 students. Did you have 3-4 students come up at a time to recite their lessons to you?
Well, the whole class, each class.
Okay.
And there were a couple of chairs, child-sized chairs too there, but we didn't usually need those.
Okay.
Though we used those for younger children sometimes. Their feet didn't reach the floor from the bench, right? Yeah.
Do you remember how many students were in your one-room schoolhouse?
Well, I had 23 students altogether, but never more than 21 at a time.
Okay.
Because at one point, a couple of students moved away, and a month or two later, then a couple more students moved in to the neighborhood.
Mm.
So I usually had, I think 20 or 21 most of the time.
It's pretty sizable.
Yeah.
It's very sizable. So I don't remember where I was going with this. I had a question. So the students would typically interact with each other, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What was the discipline like as a teacher? Did you have any specific rules or expectations of your students?
Well, I expected them to not get up and run around the room unless they had a real purpose in it.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly, and I did not allow unnecessary talking or goofing off in class or anything like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were well behaved,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe students are now, but it's entirely different in classrooms.
Today.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, of all the teachers we've interviewed, we've asked them how has education changed through the years, and the number one thing they say is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
Oh, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Did you have rules like if you had to go to the bathroom, raise your hand, and do one or two?
I think maybe they were used to that kind of thing. I'm the one that had to learn it, learn the system, because I wasn't familiar with it. But yes.
Okay.
But because they had mid-morning recess and noon and afternoon recess, there wasn't much of that getting up to go during school time.
Mm-hmm. Did a lot of older students help out younger students at all?
I had them do that. There were some of them that like and a couple that I wouldn't wish on anybody younger, just because that wasn't their thing to do.
Mm.
But yes, the older ones did sometimes help the younger ones. And especially with things like the kindergarten first graders who needed to learn the alphabet or something like that, and take them off in a corner, or sometimes take them out and sit on the floor in the entryway, and with the flashcards and help them to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And, or with adding or subtracting, so on, with the younger ones. And yes, they helped that way.
Mm-hmm.
And one girl was especially good about it. She was 12 years old and just seemed a natural-born teacher. Yeah.
So that must have been a lot different when you went to public school and it was just 1 or 2 grades of everybody the same age.
That was very different,
Mm-hmm.
but I enjoyed that too.
Mhm.
I learned through doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Did you find it easier to just handle people, or like the students of all the same age, or was it just about the same?
It was just very different.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that it, as far as that's concerned, I started babysitting when I was 10 years old. I was babysitting with my brothers and sisters when I was 9, and babysitting for other people by the time I was 10. So I was used to being around children and taking care of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have any behaviorally challenged students at any point?
No, not really.
Okay.
There's one little boy that I thought he was born lazy probably, but so sometimes he was a challenge just to get him to do anything.
Mm.
And, but as far as, oh, all right, in the spring, a kindergarten boy moved in, and he was a behavior problem. He just he couldn't sit still and he couldn't be quiet. Wasn't that he talked a lot, but he made sounds all the time, and he'd get louder and wilder and in his movements and so on. And one day that happened while I was talking to the whole school, and he just was bouncing up and down in his seat. He was big for his age. I mean, you'd have thought he was 7 or 8 years old, and he was 5. But he was, and getting louder and louder in his sounds. And I walked over and I just slapped his cheek. And he stopped and looked at me and sat right down quietly. No problem. But his big sister went home and said, "Teacher slapped him." And the parents came right in and wanted to know what I was doing slapping their son. So I told them what happened. "Oh, and it worked?" She said, "We have to shove him into this bedroom and lock the door until he calms down."
Oh.
But they hadn't warned me before he came either. You know, but it worked. And I never had a problem with him in school after that.
Wow.
He was just quiet and well behaved.
Just like that.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
And I didn't slap him hard, just, you know, just.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking and I just did it and never thought anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, until they came.
Oh, it worked?
Yes. Yeah.
The parent learns from the teacher.
Well, sometimes parents do learn from the teacher.
Absolutely. Do you have a best day in class that you remember?
No. Most days were good.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any, like, let's say, students who passed their 8th grade exams, or?
Well, I had an 8th grade student who finished 8th grade, but back then we didn't do anything. I mean, he didn't have to go in for tests or anything then. It's the generation before that had to go into the courthouse and pass the tests and so on. And now I know they do graduation ceremonies and things like that, but they didn't then.
Oh,
He was through 8th grade. He was going to high school the next fall.
so there weren't any 8th grade exams.
No.
Okay. Interesting. Usually during this time, teachers were hard at work trying to prepare their students to pass their 8th grade exams, but that's so interesting that you didn't have that.
I don't think we did.
Oh, wow.
I only had one 8th grader, but and if he'd had tests, he'd have passed. He was a good student.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he had them and just
He-
flying
he
colors.
Well, he just was so much more mature than any of the 7th graders. And
Mhm. Okay, good to know. So you talked about interacting with that kindergartner's parents.
Mhm.
Did you have any other interactions with parents at all?
Not particularly. Not anything to do with behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
But you had a sense of like autonomy, though, as a one-room school teacher, right?
Oh, yes.
How did that feel? What was that like to you?
Like a larger group to babysit. Well, no, I just was used to being in charge of children.
Mm-hmm.
That part of it I was prepared for.
Mm-hmm. But then your superintendent would come in during the year. How many times did he come and visit you?
I don't know. Probably 4, maybe 5 times.
4 or 5 times. Did he talk to you or at all? Or?
Well, he would talk to me before he left,
Mm-hmm.
and never anything negative.
Mm-hmm.
It just was. And in fact, I don't remember him even making suggestions. Just checking to see how things are going.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember his name at all?
No.
He was there.
Mhm.
Sometimes not quite sure he was
Well-
there, but he was there.
He was hiding.
I really, when I probably talked to him 5 minutes at a time at the most,
Mhm.
after I once was hired, and didn't talk to him much longer than that before I was hired. So, I don't know.
Let's see here. Excuse me. So you did not go through consolidation, correct?
No.
No. Let's see here. So, do you remember if your school was used for anything besides teaching in your community? Let's say elections,
Mhm.
let's see, church-related activities, things like that.
Not anything that year that I was there.
Did you use your school for Christmas programs?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yes. Yes, we had a Christmas program.
What was your program like?
I remember it was a lot of fun.
Mm.
I don't know that I can tell you now what it was. We did more than just a Christmas program there. We had one program was one-act skits for different groups, and another program I think was music and stories and things like that they did. So. But the Christmas program was, I remember one of the things we used was the story of the animals at Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even remember now the name of it,
Yeah.
but
I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
Can you explain the story a little bit?
well, how the different animals come to see the Lord Jesus and the baby Jesus, and I think we made some paper mache masks, like for the donkey and the ox and so on. And, the whole school worked on making that kind of thing for it. And that's the only thing I remember out of that part, out of the Christmas one. That's what sticks in my mind.
Mm. The parents would come?
Oh,
All
yes.
friends, family?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. The school would be absolutely packed with people for it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's quite lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just a good neighborhood, and they were very, very supportive of the school. They wanted to keep it going, and they knew that, that it was coming to an end, because one by one, more like 2 or 3 at a time of the country schools were closing in that county.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Any in your township at that time by 1950?
Well, there were, at least 2 that had closed the year before, a year or 2 years before.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one other open, and I think that they were the last 2 schools to be open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I said Mount Pleasant, no, Mount Valley.
Mount Valley?
Mount Valley schools, they
Mount
were.
Valley schools. Okay. So if there was another school still open, you had teachers in your community, right?
There was another teacher,
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember how I got to know her, but I did. But she was, her school was, trying to think just where it was from mine, but we were close.
Do you remember her name?
Dunbar, Mrs. Dunbar.
Mrs. Dunbar?
Mm-hmm. And she was a good deal older than me. Her children were grown up, gone by then. Well, obviously, if I was 18 when I started teaching, but I soon turned 19, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And she was, I don't know how old she was, but she was a real help to me, because when I had a question, I could call her up in the evening. She lived in Forest City too, so I could call her and ask her about it, and that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Because other than that, I didn't know any teachers of country schools. So it was, well, most of what I knew about country schools was from hearsay from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember any instances that you called her to ask about a question?
No, it probably was more, like when we were going to have, when should we have a school program? How often do you do that? And because, there was nothing left there from the teacher before me. They'd had the same teacher for 6 years and dearly loved her. And which was probably one reason they were such good students as they were, because she was a good teacher. But there were no records for me to see of what her schedule was or how she did things and so on. So I just had a list of books that I was to teach and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't know her at first, Mrs. Dunbar at first, but I did a couple of times. I stopped after school, stopped at her school and asked her some questions about something, but it was mostly with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
you know, what's expected, what should I do, so on.
It's nice you had a support system.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Did her schoolhouse look similar to yours?
It looked a lot shabbier than ours,
Mm.
both inside and out. And it may have been there a lot longer than ours, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. So what was a typical attire for teachers? What did you typically wear on a
Oh,
school
you
day?
wore a dress
Mm-hmm.
or a skirt and blouse, very definitely.
Mm-hmm. Students very much the same.
Oh, yes, girls wore dresses.
Did boys wear jeans or?
Um, I know they didn't wear bib overalls like they'd worn the generation before.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure that I think they wore trousers, but I don't think they wore blue jeans at all.
Okay.
Blue jeans weren't all that popular back then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
You know? They wore the same kind of clothes that the boys wore when I was in school.
Okay. So pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So you taught until 51.
Mm-hmm.
You left that schoolhouse. Do you remember what happened to that schoolhouse ever?
I don't know what happened to it, but my daughter and I were driving around that way one day and went out to see that schoolhouse, and it wasn't there.
Okay.
It was gone.
So they probably took it down or something. Mm-hmm.
It was pretty well built, so I would guess somebody probably took it to, moved it
Mm-hmm.
rather than just destroyed it.
We can only hope, right?
Hmm?
We can only hope, right?
Well, it really was a well-built building.
Mm-hmm.
And but I've wondered, what happened to it, because most of those buildings, if they were well built at all, they were moved and either became a part of somebody's house or one of their sheds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I
a lot
don't know for
yeah.
this.
a lot of people did turn them into homes or
Mm-hmm.
storage or galleries or
Yes.
garages.
Mm-hmm.
But, oh my gosh, excuse me. So you taught until what year?
Well, at country school, just 51.
51.
52. Went to college 51, so 52 was the year I taught.
Okay, 51,
Yeah.
52. Okay. And then after 52.
And then 52 to 54, I taught in Fertile,
Okay.
Iowa, and then I went back to college in I went back to college in 55. And then taught in Hudson from 56 to three years in Hudson. Okay. and then raised family for a few years, and then taught in Hawkeye from 69 through 73. And then again, then we moved away from Hawkeye, and later we moved back there again, and I substitute taught for a couple of years there. And in between times, I worked in a daycare center in Waverly. And there I worked as substitute, but I worked a little less than full time. But I replaced everybody from the cook and janitor, the teachers, to the aides, to the administrator. So, yeah. So I've had experience in daycare centers.
Right.
Yes.
So why did you stop teaching then?
Because we kept moving around. My husband was a minister, and his churches, for the most part, were country churches or small town churches, and by the time the Methodist and the EV Church merged to become United Methodist, we had moved and moved and moved and moved, and so we moved to wherever, whatever was going on. We used to laugh about it. We moved. Said one year he buys the car, and the next year we move, and then he buys a car, and the next year we move. Story of my life. But I stopped teaching. I stopped teaching in public schools when we moved to Waverly. The second time in Waverly, because we had 4 children by then, and we had foster children, and all of them were teenagers. So we had from 5 to 8 teenagers at home for 7 years. So so I didn't teach then.
What do you miss most about teaching?
What?
What do you miss most about teaching?
The kids.
Mm.
The kids. It was for years it was hard for me the first day of school. I just was lonesome for the kids. Lonesome to get started with them. But that's all right. I've outgrown that.
Was there anything you disliked about teaching?
I don't know of anything I just liked about it. Not anything that would make me want to quit teaching. I think I'd have trouble teaching with anymore, because I think having kids so overactive in the classroom would really be hard for me. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
but I'm not young enough to cope with it either anymore. So no.
You talk about remembering your students as in country school. Remembering your students as just a good group of kids. How do you think your students would remember you today?
I don't know. I've never thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just assumed that they would not remember me,
Oh.
but I don't know.
Have you seen any of your students through the years, or remained in contact, or bumped into anyone?
I don't know that I have. It's different because if I'd lived in the same community and taught in the same community, yes, then I'm sure that, that I would run into them. But we've lived in so many different places.
Mm-hmm.
I just have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Are you comfortable talking about how much you earned as a teacher, what your salary was in country school?
Mm-hmm. I think it was either 1,300 or 1,500. I think it was 1,300, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
That country school. And then I think when I taught in Fertile, I think it was 1,500 there.
Okay, so.
And then when I taught for Hudson, it was as I was paid by the university, and that was 3,000 a month, and that's I just felt overwhelmed with riches to be paid that much money.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I got my first paycheck and I went out and bought an automatic washer and dryer.
That's a good.
Well, I had to have one, or else go to the laundromat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel your salary in country school was just about right?
Yes.
Yes.
It was
Okay.
more than I'd ever earned before.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I started babysitting when I was 10 for 10 cents an hour. And I was still getting that when I was, I think I was about 15 when I graduated to 25 cents an hour.
Mm-hmm. Not too shabby, right? Not too shabby.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
That was going rates.
Mm. All right. Well, just to wrap up here, in your opinion, Marion, what are some of the biggest education changes today? What strikes you most?
Computers, electronics. And I think the expectations for the children,
Mm-hmm.
and, for not only behavior, but the fact that they are expected to learn so many things so much younger, and they do learn them. So I guess it's all right. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And there just are so many changes. I'm at least 2 generations away from when I started teaching, and maybe more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think those are the biggest changes.
How do you feel about cursive writing being slowly taken away from the curriculum today?
Well, I don't know that will make such a big difference in anybody's life as some of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very concerned that they're not teaching history. There's very little history taught anymore. And And I just think that's not a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, I admit, that the history that is taught needs to be taught. Different things need to be taught to different generations, but I think we need to know what's gone before in order to avoid some of the pitfalls.
Mhm.
Um,
So, like, a lot of schools have been shying away from like humanities,
I know.
and more STEM-based.
Yes, I know.
There's a part that's lost in that way. Right?
Well, I think so.
Mhm.
I think so. And with all the electronics, when you see two girls walking down the street and texting to each other rather than talking to each other, you don't get the same relationship.
Mhm.
And I think, well, I think it shows in everything about people. People need to be, you need to rub shoulders with people. You need to be with people, and not just interact in your mind.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's good for the world.
Mhm.
Good for, I think this electronic age, I think that we're at a stage a lot like when they went from what, cloth, carpets, things being done in homes by families, and gone into the industrial age.
Mm.
I think we're at that kind of a turnover, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. In some ways, I'd like to live long enough to see, but I'm a little bit afraid I won't like what I see. So maybe I don't want to live to be 110. But anyway.
In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges that students face today?
I'm not sure what the biggest challenges are. In school, I think that one of the biggest challenges they face in life is interpersonal behavior. And maybe they are going to learn in school how to get along with other people, how to relate to other people. Because I'm not in a classroom, I don't know if those skills are being taught in ways that the children can respond positively. But the fact that everything is being taught as no absolute truths, no this is right and this is wrong, for the most part, it's just a whole different situation. I'd have to go visit classrooms. You know, all I know is what I hear secondhand, you know, from my daughter as a teacher, and Barb teaches the TAG program here, the Talented and Gifted Children. Okay, and then the workers here, most of them have young children, and so I hear, and I know those children, and the parents talk to me. So, but that means everything I know about classrooms is secondhand, not firsthand at all. So,
Right.
yeah.
What are the biggest takeaways from your country school experience as a teacher? Do you have any specific lessons, or what do you want people to remember about your country school years?
That country school years are a very good system for teaching children. One of the things I learned in high school was that children who had been to country schools, most of them were automatically leaders in the classrooms. They learned self-confidence and leadership skills that, you know, we had a classroom of 30 students and get the same 4 or 5 people were leaders class after class after class. You know, in country school you get 4 or 5 leaders out of every country school, and it just made a big difference. And so I think it's a good system. Granted, once in a while there's a bad teacher in country school, or there's a neighborhood where there's not the support for the school like I had. And then, yes, you don't get the leadership out of that school. But I just sat, I'm an observer, I guess, and I just would see it, that the kids that came out of the country schools, there'd be, well, at least 2 or 3 out of every country school, and sometimes it's 4 or 5, that just were at the head of the class. They were the ones that did things in school, that led the class. And that's good. We need that. I mean, we've lost leadership in this country, you know. It's just not the same. That's all. And sometimes I think, well, maybe that's just an old woman's thinking, but but yes.
There's that absence of strong-minded country school teachers nowadays, right?
Right.
People they're not growing up with that anymore.
Right.
But that's we haven't heard that response before, so that's a really neat thing to hear from the perspective of a teacher. So that's quite lovely. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
No,
No?
I don't know what it would be.
I
I feel like that one year in country school was the basis for so many things I did through my life, and you know, like helping getting this individualized reading program. I don't know if they still do it at all or not. I've never asked Barb. Well, she's not in a regular classroom, so I don't know if she'd know.
Mhm.
But, and then when I was teaching in Hawkeye, I filled out a school year for a teacher who needed to move away, and discovered in the closet a kit that had never even been unwrapped, of teaching speech and language skills.
Really?
And it turned out it had been sitting there for a couple of years, and it hadn't even taken out of the wrapper. Well, I looked at it and decided, hey, that's a pretty neat thing to use. And this was toward the end of kindergarten, and there were still several children who couldn't talk plain. So I got it out and used it. Well, then the next year they got a speech therapist for a 3-county area, and I was using this kit for teaching kindergarten, and he came in and tested all of my children, and almost 2/3 of them had speech problems. He said, how can I ever get around to work with that many kids with speech problems? So I knew that the little kids in town just didn't talk plain. It was a town with a German background and hard-working, good people, but they didn't spend time talking to their children and that sort of thing, for one thing. And anyway, he came in and saw me working with this speech and language kit. And so he watched, he'd check in with me, every week or two on it and see how it was coming. And then after, 4 months or 5 months, he checked all the children again, and only 1/3 of them still had speech problems.
Really?
And so he and I talked it over, and we ended up, he and a sister in a Catholic school in another town, and I wrote a pilot project for using this in kindergartens, and first grades. And the state accepted that pilot project too. And within 2 years, the schools were just flooded with these speech and language programs for kindergarten and first grade.
Really?
Yeah.
You pioneered 2 programs in Iowa?
Yeah. No, I don't know if my name is even listed in them, but yes, one was working with, I can't think of her name, Dr. Ardith, I can't think of the last name. I think it began with a W. One day it popped into my mind, and I thought, that was her. Yeah, but I don't remember now. And I've forgotten the name of this speech therapist too. But yes, and if I hadn't taught that 1 year of country school, I wouldn't have had any idea how to, that these things could turn into something important.
Exactly.
Something that changed education a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know, if they're still in use or anything like it, but I don't hear children with all the speech problems that I was hearing up in Northeast Iowa.
Did they have did these programs have a specific title or name or?
individualized reading
Visual reading.
was the one, and the other one was the speech and language development or something of that sort.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. That's,
That's really neat.
yeah.
Huh. You're kind of a legend in
Well,
Iowa
that's-
education,
No,
aren't you?
I'm not a legend. Nobody knows. And, you know, and nobody here would be interested in it or would talk to me about it.
Really?
You know,
Okay.
well, down there at dinner were a lawyer and a couple of women that worked in banks all their lives.
Mhm.
And what else have they done? They've all had very productive lives, but all totally different from mine.
Mhm.
I don't think there's another teacher down there.
Okay.
You know.
Well, that's neat.
because I spent more time teaching kindergarten or first grade than anything else. Someone finally one day said to me, "When are you get enough education that you can teach 8th graders?"
Oh,
dear.
gosh.
Yes.
Well, Mary, gosh, we can't thank you enough for today.
Well,
Honestly, we've
this
been
was
looking
great.
so forward to this. Ah,
well, I just thank you because, like I say, nobody wants to hear what I say, and my voice doesn't carry well, so I seldom talk down in the dining room because nobody can hear me. And my interests are different.
mhm. Well, your video is actually going to be going up online. We have created a website at the UNI Museum that actually houses every single interview we've done through the years.
Wow.
And we've actually created an interactive map where you can find each schoolhouse with the
Oh.
corresponding interview.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
that's why we're so deep. We
Wow.
ask.
Yes, all right. Well, it's if you go out on Highway 9,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of turning to go south to Pilot Knob, turn north 2 miles,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's the
that's
coal.
it.
The coal house.
No, this Cold Schoolhouse. No, I'm telling you the school where I taught.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is the Cold Schoolhouse on your map? Is it
No.
the whole state?
It is the whole state. We've started with.
You
We've-
should talk to my daughter Barb because she's the one that knows all about it.
Really? We might have to have a chat.
What time is it?
It's
Clock's
almost
up
2
here.
o'clock. We actually have to get going soon because we
yeah.
work tonight at
Oh.
another jobs, you know. Can't live off a grad assistant salary.
Oh, yeah.
But I will actually call you again once we get your interview up. And then maybe you and your family can look at it or have your daughter help, bringing the website up or something. But we're going to let you know when your interview's up and when you're published and going live. So
I didn't realize it was going to be like that. I didn't even realize you were going to do pictures of them.
Oh, yeah.
That's
We're
That's great.